Peace. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of the Foul Playland. As always, I'm your foul player. Wanted to make a boxing video. I haven't done one in a minute, and I kind of want to veer off of boxing in the future. I'm still a big fan, but my fanhood is a little not waning, but I'm not in on it like I used to be. Like where I watch boxing content all the time. That's not like a really recent thing. That's probably been like the last like year or two, maybe like closer to 2 years, probably since COVID era. But I want to get on to talking other stuff. There's too much more serious things in my eyes that are happening in the world throughout the country in here in the tri-state New York City area. Rather talk about that stuff. I mean, like, because that stuff's more pressing. But that's for the future. This evening, I'm going to be solely discussing or I'm hoping to only discuss the fight that's coming up tomorrow, July 29th of 2023, the fight we've all been waiting for, the fight that kind of took a little bit too long to materialize, but we're here now. And that fight is Errol Spence versus Bud Crawford, live on Showtime pay-per-view tomorrow. Having said that, I talked a lot of shit about not buying the pay-per-view. That I wasn't going to pay for the fight because they had over-maturated the fight in my eyes and not giving the fight fans what we wanted. And I've had the contention for many years already. I mean, here on YouTube, there's evidence of that because I don't delete my videos in which I thought Errol Spence / PBC were to blame in this regard as to why we didn't get the fight, in 2018, 2019. But we're here now. I mean, like, you want to talk about that? We could if I get bored. But otherwise, I just want to do more of a breakdown and my prediction. And I'll give my prediction throughout the fight, like, so it's not like a what do you call that? Like where you're waiting something. But I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys, if you've watched my videos regarding boxing with any sort of consistency, which I'm not consistent as far as video making, but I mean, consistency in regards to long term, I've been saying who I thought would win the fight and who didn't want to fight. Who wanted the fight. So I think the guy that wanted the fight more, not just because he wanted the fight more, but if I'm dropping any sort of a clue or any sort of a damn, I know the word. I had the word that's in my tongue too. If I'm dropping any sort of clues as to who's gonna win tomorrow, you could probably go back to my past videos as to who I thought was more on the path of avoidance versus who was more on the path of conversation throughout the years where this fight was kind of like in limbo and negotiation, whatever have you. But just now, I mean, before this stream, I took a shower. But before I took a shower, and I was with my brother's grandson. He's actually downstairs sleeping as we speak. My little man, Jack. But he's a baby, 3 months old. But right before I took a shower, I actually did a little bit of due diligence, and I rewatched Ugas versus Errol Spence because I thought of Errol Spence more recent opponents. Him and the fresher Kell Brook that Errol Spence fought were good. Not comparable. I'm not gonna say comparable, like because none of those guys is a switch hitter. None of those guys I think is more like Bud Crawford is. Neither one of those guys and or Dennis Ugas or Kell Brook, the version which Errol Spence fought to take Kell Brook's belt in the UK. None of those guys are super comparable to Terrance Crawford because, I mean, and I'm not making it seem as if Terrance Crawford is that dude like that. I mean, it's just not like we're in a little bit of a lull period in boxing. So, I mean, there's not fantastic fighters like that in my eyes. Like, I mean, with the exception of Crawford and Spence right now. And they're not like super exceptional. And like they're not like De La Hoya when he was in his prime. They're not like Trinidad or. But having said that, I think regardless, like we're in a little bit of a lull period as far as talent wise goes, especially at welterweight. But these have been the two top guys for going on a decade now, and they're set to fight each other. But it was hard to find comparisons. And another thing too, in years past, fighters had a little bit more of a body of work, especially at the top levels. So it was hard to do that to make these comparisons with their past opponents. To find fighters that are comparable to Errol Spence that Bud Crawford has fought in the past, and to find comparable fighters to Bud Crawford that Errol Spence has fought. But I think the two best bets that I could have found were sort of Mikey Garcia, but Mikey Garcia, I did rewatch that fight, and it seemed like he was tentative to kind of like land combos or like really bail out and try to beat Errol Spence, if you will. So it wasn't a good comparison. I mean, he does have a little bit of niftiness, but still, I mean, it wasn't a good comparison for this fight. So the best that I could come up with on Errol Spence's resume in recent history were Kell Brook or Dennis Ugas. And that's why I chose to fight I chose to look for the Yordenis Ugas fight. Now, a lot of people in the past have said that Bud Crawford's resume is not up to par with Errol Spence. I mean, I could get into a long-winded reason as to why that didn't why that's true, or why that didn't happen, like why a lot of dudes didn't line up to fight Bud Crawford, especially in recent history. But I'm not going to get into all that. But for the purpose of this exercise, as far as trying to do a breakdown and trying to find somebody who's comparable to Errol Spence that was on Bud Crawford's resume, that was a little bit harder. The only one comparison I did find, or that would be fair, is Sean Porter. I mean, and it was pretty much dead on that. That was it. I mean, Kell Brook, I can't really. I mean, to be fair, I want to say that he didn't look as good when he fought Errol Spence versus when he fought Bud Crawford. Now, some of that has to do with the man in the ring, in my eyes, but I didn't want to use that as a comparison for this fight because Bud Crawford ultimately trashed Kell Brook. I didn't give Kell Brook many rounds in that fight. I didn't rewatch the Kell Brook fight versus Bud Crawford for the purpose of this breakdown this evening either. And I watched Bud Crawford's fights regularly. You know, like it's like I watched the Avanesian fight maybe a month ago. I watched it more than once too, and I'm more of a fan of Bud Crawford than I am of Errol Spence, admittedly. So I mean, I didn't need but for the purpose of this exercise, I didn't want to rewatch many of the Bud Crawford fights, with the exception of when he fought Sean Porter, to compare it to Errol Spence. Having said that, though, the Errol Spence and Sean Porter comparison, I thought for the purposes of the exercise was also fair, because the one thing that I think Errol Spence will bring to this fight tomorrow is to try to wear down Bud Crawford sort of by bullying him. And that's kind of like what Errol Spence resorted to against Yordenis Ugas. When Errol Spence got in trouble with Yordenis Ugas in rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6, Errol Spence resorted to to bully him, to wear him down, not worry about what was coming back, but give out more to Yordenis Ugas, and ultimately that's what won him the fight, hands down. You know, I like that. You could say other stuff, because in that 6th round, I think if you look at the end of that 6th round versus Yordenis Ugas, you could see a little bit of an eye injury that happened right at the end of that round, or like that Yordenis Ugas started fucking with his eye right at the end of that round. And that's the round, if you guys aren't familiar, that's also the round where Errol Spence was knocked into the ropes and his mouthpiece came out. Errol Spence did come back in that round. He didn't win that round, though, like some people may try to tell you. I also had Errol Spence losing a lot of those rounds in 3, 4, 5, and 6. Or 3, 4 rounds 3, 4, and 5. And I also gave the Ordenis rounds 6. I gave Ordenis Ugas round 6 when he matched up with Errol Spence. Having said all that, now, two things more so with Bud Crawford. I'm gonna get into the cons in terms of Bud Crawford, like and what may bring him into not winning this fight. One of the main ones is that he plays with his food a little bit, and he did that against Sean Porter. Now, did he do that against Sean Porter because Sean Porter is a tough out? That's yet to be seen. I can't say no. I can't say yes. Did he do that with Sean Porter because Sean Porter and him have a past history and they're homies? I can't say that either. I mean, some people concluded both of those things. But ultimately, with that fight, you did see Bud Crawford sort of struggle. But it was, I mean, at the end of the day, he took the man out of there. Like, I mean, he knocked him out. And it was impressive, the knockout. Now, Errol Spence, I had him losing a lot of those rounds against Sean Porter. I mean, even though, like, that's not one of the comparisons I'm going to use, but we could reference that fight too this evening because that's a common opponent. But Errol Spence also has a tendency of playing with his food too, or getting hit by the right hand while trying to figure things out. And that's a little bit dangerous. Like Errol Spence does have a great jab. He does probe with his jab early on throughout the fight. But if somebody chooses to get dirty with him, i.e. How Sean Porter chose to get dirty with him or like gritty with him in that fight and chose to bail out and just try to land on Errol Spence in spite of what was coming back, which is a lot of it was jabs early on. I think that could be a little bit more of a problem with Terrance Crawford than it was with Sean Porter. But both of them have a tendency to play with their food early on in fights. You see that a lot in almost every Bud Crawford fight, honestly. And could it be dangerous here? Yeah, it could be dangerous. But it's not dangerous to the point where that's where I think it would be foolish if somebody were a betting man, per se, and they were to say that they thought Bud Crawford was going to lose this fight due to the whole playing with his food factor. Some people may call that like figuring things out. I mean, it's not like he's losing rounds or giving rounds away a lot of times, with the exception of that Sean Porter fight. He did give away some rounds in that fight, admittedly. But could he give away a ton of rounds early on and then put it on versus Errol Spence? I'm not sure. I don't want to say who has the better chin between Sean Porter and Errol Spence. I mean, because I've seen Errol Spence get hurt in fights. And no, I don't think having a good chin means not getting knocked down, because did Maidana have a good chin? Absolutely. Did Trinidad have a good chin? Absolutely. Both those guys would get knocked down many times in fights. So, I mean, having a good chin is just, it to me is more of a sense of not getting stunned. I mean, and not being able to recoup is just as much of a factor, if not more of a factor, of having a good chin than not being knocked down. I think not being knocked down and not getting stunned are two different things in a sense. But Sean Porter versus Errol Spence chin-wise, I mean, I can't really say, because Sean Porter didn't get knocked down many times in his career either. I mean, like he did get knocked down versus Errol Spence. He did get knocked down versus Bud Crawford, but it's not something you see habitually. One thing though with Sean Porter, which I may give Sean Porter the edge in the chin department more than Errol Spence, you don't see Sean Porter getting hurt in fights as much as Errol Spence does. Not to say that Errol Spence gets hurt a lot in fights, but he does get hurt a significant amount. And I mean, if you want to compare as to who gets hurt more in fights versus him between Errol Spence and Sean Porter, I mean, I'm gonna say Errol Spence gets hurt more in fights. Do you want to see who gets hurt more in fights between Bud Crawford and Errol Spence? I'm gonna say Errol Spence again gets hurt more in fights. So the chin factor, I do give Errol. Not to say that Errol Spence has an ass cheeks chin, but I expect Errol Spence to get tested more throughout his most of his fights because of the style he puts together. He tries to work with the jab, yes, but also work with his left low. I mean, or his tries to hook to the body, tries to invest in the body early on, left and right punches. Sometimes a little bit of an opening in Errol Spence when he tries to work with his right hand low that I've noticed throughout his career. That also could be dangerous. But I'm just going on the chin factor here. Like, and this is more in the sense that if both guys had to hunker down and fight really close, a la Sean Porter versus Errol Spence, like who would come out the victor in that fight? Did Sean and early on when Terrance Crawford fought Sean Porter, there were segments of that fight in which Sean Porter was getting gritty on Terrance Crawford, and Sean Porter was winning rounds on Terrance Crawford, without a doubt. Now, if they did that with each other, who would win that kind of a fight? I would probably edge it more towards Errol Spence, honestly. And I'm gonna say, and I'll use my comparison with the Ugas. And again, I'm using Ugas as a comparison with Crawford amidst Errol Spence's resume because there weren't many guys that I could consider slick. I mean, I didn't want to put Peterson because Peterson was moving up in weight, and I gave Errol Spence no credit for fighting Peterson at that stage of his career. Peterson was on his way out. It was like a PBC like throwaway fight in a sense. So I'm not gonna, and I didn't want to use this as that comparison, but Peterson does have that slick factor. Ugas sort of has that slick factor, but Ugas doesn't. Ugas daydreams a little bit in the ring in the sense that he'll watch what's going on and try to win moving backward. Try to win moving backwards, being kind of exclusive as far as output goes. Sort of like an older Bernard Hopkins style of fighting that I saw with Ugas in his career, like when he fought Manny Pacquiao, when he fought Sean Porter, even so, when he fought Errol Spence too. I mean, like there were times when Errol Spence got the most gritty performance out of Ugas, and it wasn't like, wow, like Ugas is fighting in this real gritty style. No, I think Ugas saw that he had success catching Errol Spence with pop shots with his right hand, specifically as Errol Spence was coming in. He started doing that in round 3, and in terms of catching Errol Spence with his right hand as he was coming in and having a lot of success with it, I thought. And he started doing that he kept doing it in round 4, 5, and 6. In that exchange in which Errol Spence lost his mouthpiece, I think he caught him with 3 right hands, one and 2 of them were before he lost the mouth guard, if I remember correctly. But that craftiness, that's why of Ugas is why I'm using that as a comparison for Bud Crawford in this fight. Again, Bud Crawford fights nothing like Ordenis Ugas. It's just that it's hard to pick from all their resumes good comparisons for this fight. But if in terms of like Ordenis Ugas landing the right hand, he sort of found an opening early on. I mean, from round 3 on, and he's exploited that opening. Some people say that I had Ordenis Ugas winning some of the rounds between 3, 4, 5, and 6. I didn't want to annotate it now while I was watching the fight again, but I did have him winning some of the rounds before they round 6 where he knocked Errol Spence's mouthpiece out. And he started winning some of those rounds because of what I'm telling you in terms of setting up traps, or not even, it wasn't really setting up traps. He was just catching, he was sort of setting up traps. When he caught him in the round 3, he did set up a trap for Errol, because Errol ended up walking into the hardest right hand of round 3, which was in the latter portion of round 3. Now, could he get away with doing that with Bud Crawford? I don't know. I didn't have Ugas in the past as like somebody with a bad chin, because he gutted it out versus Porter. Now, Porter's not the hardest hitting dude in the world. Yes, but he did gut it out with Porter. He didn't get into the Sean Porter's fight, no. But Sean Porter's going to come at you with nonstop, and Ugas was able to neutralize that. So, I mean, and that's done through craft, and that's why I use the Ugas fight as a comparison for Bud Crawford as a reference point for this fight. But it's tough. I mean, because I saw a lot of holes in that fight, and then there were many times when Errol Spence was hurt in that fight versus Ugas, and Ugas isn't the hardest hitting dude in the world. He has somewhat cracks, and I started noticing after rewatching the fight right before this video, he does have a little bit amount of crack, especially when he's setting traps like he did against Errol Spence, but nothing to that point. I mean, like when you catch somebody clean, like he was catching Errol Spence with his right hand, I mean, you're bound to hurt somebody. But I've seen Errol Spence hurt in other fights too, like Sean Porter. No, he didn't get hurt against Danny Garcia. Like, I mean, a lot of people are fronting with that notion. Danny Garcia didn't get one good thing off on Errol Spence. And in the past, I've also said that Errol Spence's performance versus Danny Garcia, not factoring the fact that Errol Spence came back from the car accident and then went on to fight Danny Garcia. No, it's not an amazing feat because Danny Garcia had no belt, but Danny Garcia was still Danny Garcia. That was a nothing fight. I didn't give him much credit for taking that fight, but I did give him credit for how he looked in that fight, because in my eyes, that was Errol Spence's best performance. Yes, he didn't knock out Danny Garcia, sure, but Errol Spence was moving around, and I think that was the tactic from Jump Street. And I'm not saying moving around in a bad way. He looked good in that fight. He looked super conditioned. But to me, that was Spence's best performance historically, in my eyes. 1 second, I'm trying to fix something with the computer. But could he do that with Terrance Crawford? I don't think so. I don't think that those traps that Ugas was laying out for Errol Spence were sophisticated in that fashion. Like, they weren't like super complex. And they came early on. You usually set your traps for later on in the fight, or if you peep something really early, and you could capitalize on it, yeah, employ it earlier. But usually you're expecting these a crafty fighter like Ugas to set traps for round 8 or some shit, and that's not what happened in this fight. They were simplistic traps. It was basically just back and giving Errol Spence a little bit of room to swing off and slightly miss, or Dennis Ugas not get hit, back off a little bit, and having him fall into his right hand. And it stunned him every time. It stunned him a few times. There were 3 times in that fight that Errol Spence was hurt. Now, again, Dennis Ugas, not the hardest hitter in the world, but could he do that with Bud Crawford? Get hurt or get hit by a trap that Terrance Crawford sets up, and win on an exchange, like right after he gets hit by a right hand of Crawford, or if he gets hit in when there's 2 minutes left early on in the fight, could he get out of that round like that unscathed against Terrance Crawford? And that's to be determined. I don't really see it. But moving on, I mean, I'll come back to these points afterwards too. Another factor too, and I'm gonna hop back and forth too, like because I didn't write shit down. Your boy likes to freestyle, but I'll keep coming back and forth to some of these points. Now, in terms of Terrance Crawford, the playing with the food factor. I mean, I mentioned that. Like, could he get away with doing that with Errol Spence? Yet to be determined. Because say what you will, Errol Spence does have cracks, and could he play with his food, survive a round, or come out of that round, hurt, and then go into a out gut trying to performance because he's not able to move around as fluidly with Errol Spence. I think Terrance Crawford could get in a lot of trouble doing that. So he has to be selective. I think personally, if it were me, I mean, I didn't box for that long, and I'm not like an expert in breaking down fights or discussing fighters or in discussing tactics, but I'm not completely lost. But if it were up to me, in terms of Bud Crawford versus like tomorrow, he should try to fight exclusively in the traditional stance as much as he could. Bud Crawford a lot of times switches stances in the midst of action. Sometimes he'll switch stances from southpaw to traditional and vice versa, even though he's having success with the stance that he just popped out of. So, for instance, if he's fighting traditionally in the traditional stand, left hand forward, he sometimes has success in that stance and will revert back to fighting southpaw. I'm not sure why he does that. I mean, like he did that versus Avanesian. Now, I didn't want to use Avanesian as a comparison, even though it's recent history, because to me, Avanesian never really has success. And to me, also, Avanesian, like Peterson, is a fighter. He didn't come up to 147 for that fight, I believe. But to me, Avanesian had his best success at 140. And i.e., like when he fought Mikey Garcia. I mean, he didn't beat Mikey Garcia, and I'm not going to tell you that that was a debatable fight. But Mikey Garcia was considered a pound-for-pound number one fighter in some people's eyes. I didn't see that, but I did have not a rooting interest, but I did like Mikey Garcia when he was fighting at the lower weights. But when he moved up to 140, he started looking normal in my eyes. And that first fight, to me, where he started looking normal was versus Avanesian. And I didn't give Avanesian credit before that fight, and I didn't give him much credit after that fight. I also thought when Avanesian fought Bud Crawford, that was a useless fight. But some of you guys in the boxing fanatic world nowadays will ride somebody's tip for collecting a lot of money to take a fight. And Terrance Crawford, according to reports, collect a lot of money for that fight, $10 million. Not that I'm rooting. Oh yeah, like great. Like I am a Terrance Bud Crawford fan, but I'm not one of those type of dudes that is gonna applaud everything you do just because my preference goes in your direction as a fighter. No. But having said all that, see, I forgot the point I was trying to make. But I know what I was talking about. In terms of what could be coming back towards Bud Crawford, like in terms of him fighting in the traditional stance as well, I would stay more in the traditional stance with Errol Spence specifically. Errol Spence, if he showed that ability to get caught with those weak ass traps that Dennis Ugas was throwing in his direction, then he'll definitely get caught with those weak ass traps that with a better trap that Terrance Crawford may lay out for him. And I'm saying like that Terrance Crawford should do that and try to invest and find the opening for his right hand tomorrow evening versus Errol Spence. I think that he should be looking for that. I think he should be studying this Ugas fight and seeing that what Ugas laid out there wasn't that complicated. He does have niftiness on the inside if he wants to. Terrance Crawford is a great body puncher with his right hand too from that traditional stance. And Terrence Bud Crawford knows how to work that whole portion of the. Terrence Crawford works the right side, the left side of his opponent with his right hand really well up close. And this is more like on the body from the trunk line up and from the trunk line to the chin, if you will. So I think he should look for that with this fight tomorrow. I think he should bait it. I think he could try to bait Errol Spence into thinking that the fight may turn out in that fashion, like where they're gonna try to grit it out and try to find himself an opening to get Errol Spence out of there. See that this is a lot harder of an exercise for me when it comes to Terrence Crawford because I don't want to seem like a fanboy too. I do want Terrence Crawford to win in this fight. I am a bigger fan of his than I am of Errol Spence. In fact, I'm not that big of a fan of Errol Spence any longer. In terms of like, I thought that he was the reasoning as to why this fight didn't happen sooner. But I'm not gonna lie to you and say that the debate in terms of who Bud Crawford fought at 147 isn't tangible because Kell Brook wasn't shit when they fought. Sean Porter, I mean, did he lose a step? I'm not gonna say he did. I mean, like because he looked comparable to how he fought versus Errol Spence. There was some times that I thought Porter looked better versus Crawford than what he looked versus Spence. That's just me. But there wasn't much to pick from, and like that's why it may seem like I have more of a critique in what I was seeing, what Errol Spence may fall short at come tomorrow, come the 27th. Speaking of which, too, I am gonna watch this fight tomorrow. I've been watching fights from my phone. Normally, I have my man Michael Johnson Boxing Talking More. Most times, send me a link. He has good links, but they're a pain in the ass sometimes to watch fights off your phone because you got to keep, Xing shit out and whatever. Like, I mean, it's a pain in the ass. So I was gonna order this fight tomorrow, like in earnest. I mean, as much shit I talked in the past that I wasn't gonna order any fights anymore because this is a lot of money, bro. Like, I mean, $85 to pay a fight for a fight, it's too much. But my cousin's birthday was yesterday, and he's doing a little party at his house tomorrow, and he has a legit like setup. Like I don't think he's paying for the fights, but he has like a good service where I think he pays like $30 a month, and he gets every pay-per-view, all that shit. I've watched like a lot of UFC fights at his house. He's actually brought his little Fire Stick thing, whatever the fuck he uses, because I don't know shit about technology either. Thus the reason I don't have my own Fire Stick, if you will. Like, but I'm watching the fight at my cousin's house. So in essence, I'm not paying for the fight. I did buy my cousin a birthday gift, which I probably would not have bought otherwise. But it was a holster. It was like $25. It was like $30. But so yeah, I not paying full price for this fight. I'm paying what I paid for the holster to watch this fight. And my cousin cooked some bomb stuff too. So it's gonna be a good time as far as he lives in my same town here in Jersey. But going back to the breakdown. So again, I mean, if you guys want to reward the fighters for fighting, for finally getting together and having this fight tomorrow, I'm not gonna knock it. Personally, though, don't buy any fights. Let boxing reset itself and let these guys fight for 100,000 or some shit. Let it be to where some rich guy who made money off crypto or some shitty ass investment has enough money to break off two fighters and they fight in his living room or in his backyard. We got to get boxing back to that, and I think there'll be a lot more fights. But that's just my little tirade for the evening. But buy the fight if you want. Don't buy the fight if you want. Who cares? It's your life. If you're broke, don't buy the fight, though. Please. in trying to find drawbacks with Bud Crawford. Listen, I'm not gonna front. Like, does Bud Crawford has a history of being hurt? Yes, but that was a long ago history of being hurt. That was at the lower weight. Some people bring up when he fought my man's from Cuba. I forget his name, but he was put down in that fight a bunch of times. I remember that fight vividly because I actually went to a party right after that, and I was holding off going to the party because I was watching that fight and I was ironing my shit while I was watching that Bud Crawford fight in Nebraska, and I was that left me less impressed than more impressed when he fought. Pulling up his name now. My brain is shot not lately since I had this stupid accent, but bear with me. When he fought against Gamboa, I left that fight less impressed than more impressed. But that was so long ago. I mean, like, trying to pull it up now. If I had to guess, that was 2018, 2014. My bad, but woof, man, that was a long time ago. But all these other fights, I mean, was when and I'm that at the lower weights when he was fighting at he fought Gamboa at lightweight. I mean, did he look more susceptible against Beltran than he has against anybody at the 147-pound division? No way. The only time, like, I mean, did he look more susceptible against Postal? Like, no. Did he look susceptible against Molina? Absolutely not. Like, I mean, and this is at light. I mean, yeah, it's not at 147. But what I'm trying to say is, as Terrance Bud Crawford has moved up in weight, he's looked way less susceptible. He didn't struggle with Jeff Horn. He did struggle against Benavidez, and I mean, Benavidez did have a knee issue going into that fight. They would. Jose Benavidez had a knee issue within the fight. And it still went 12 rounds, against Benavidez. I'm not going to say he was playing with his food or any, I'm not going to make up no shit either. But I mean, I'm trying to draw off his welterweight record. I mean, Benavidez was honestly, in my eyes, one of the better fights that Bud Crawford fought. Not best performances, no, but best competition that he fought. He was I believe Benavidez was unbeaten at that time going into that fight. In spite of the knee injury that Benavidez was going into the fight, he fought well in that fight. I mean, he wasn't winning many rounds, no, but it seemed to me that, I mean, it didn't seem to me, it was factual that Benavidez didn't get taken out of that fight until he had that knee injury really creep up where it seemed like he rolled his knee. A lot of people bring up the fight against Mean Machine as one of the fights in which Bud Crawford struggled. I mean, if it's a legit criticism, if you will. But I mean, after that, I mean, how many? Like, there weren't many people. Like, Mean Machine was didn't have much of a record before he fought Bud Crawford. I mean, didn't have a great resume. He did beat Avanesian before I mean, that's not much. I mean, and I don't think that was at the welterweight division too. But his best win was probably the draw he got against Ray Robinson. I kind of thought Robinson won that fight. But after Bud Crawford fought Mean Machine, which was in 2019, how many people were lining up to fight Mean Machine? Not many. The only person of substance who ended up fighting Mean Machine after that was Virgil Ortiz. And Virgil Ortiz ended up beating him in the 8th round, if memory serves me correct. But not like, I mean, Mean Machine, I'm not gonna say he's like the illest shit in the world. Like, I mean, like that he's this great fighter, but what's right is right. I mean, and not many people in the welterweight division were trying to fight Mean Machine. I mean, I don't want to use COVID as an excuse, or they weren't trying to fight Mean Machine after Bud Crawford struggled with him. And at the end of the day, I mean, he knocked out Mean Machine. I mean, in the 9th round. Some people were harping on the fact that he got hurt. Yeah, I mean, but Errol Spence gets hurt a litany of times. If you're one of the fanboys that says that Bud Crawford got hurt by Mean Machine in that fight, yeah, but I mean, are you gonna bring up the multitude of times that that Errol Spence has been hurt? I mean, against Ugas, against these lesser people, but it is a fair criticism. But now I'm gonna go down all of Bud Crawford's fights at welterweight. Did Bud Crawford get hurt against Jeff Horn? Absolutely not. Did Bud Crawford get hurt by Jose Benavidez? Absolutely not. Not one time in that fight. And I'm bringing up times in general in which, or I'm bringing up times in general where Bud Crawford may have gotten hurt by all these people at welterweight. So his first fight at welterweight was in 2018 against Jeff Horn. Again, did Jeff Horn hurt Bud Crawford once in that fight? No. Did Benavidez, in spite of the fact that he gave Bud Crawford a good fight at 147, his second fight at 147, did Benavidez hurt Bud Crawford one time in this fight? No. Did Amir Khan hurt Bud Crawford in that fight? Come on. Did Mean Machine hurt Bud Crawford? Arguably. So that's his. I mean, he fought at that time. That was his 4th fight at 147. Fair criticism if you want to say that Mean Machine did hurt Bud Crawford. But again, nobody else fought against Mean Machine of sustenance until Virgil Ortiz lined up against him. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying that in the sense of saying that Mean Machine at 147, you can't really determine that he's a bum or he's a fantastic fighter. You know what I'm saying? Like, or you can't say that a bum hurt Terrance Crawford because not many dudes have chosen to line it up with Mean Machine, with the exception of Ortiz and that other, that Euro guy, Zwicky or whatever. I forgot his name. That Mean Machine fought right before he fought Virgil Ortiz. Not right before. He fought in 2021 against that European guy, and I think he fought Virgil Ortiz in 2022. Going back to the people that have hurt or the fights that Bud Crawford fought at welterweight. Did Kell Brook hurt Bud Crawford at welterweight? Now, I'm going to do a little hard pause with this one because, I'll give you the answer right now. No, he did not hurt Bud Crawford at welterweight, Kell Brook. Going into that fight, this was at a distant time, long ago in 2020, where I remember Blue Blood Sports TV was dick riding Errol Spence at that time, heavy duty. And my man was saying right before that fight, in addition to a lot of other mouth breathers on YouTube, were saying that that Kell Brook was going to be the fight that exposed Bud Crawford and all this shit. And none of that happened. Nobody was making these backup videos then saying that, maybe we were wrong about Bud Crawford all this time because he demolished Kell Brook. And he did demolish Kell Brook. You want to say that Kell Brook wasn't the same version of himself? He probably wasn't. No. Kell Brook was fighting very similar to how I've seen Kell Brook fight in all his fights. He's some people say that he's a north and south kind of fighter where he comes in with his jab and really well and backs out of range and comes right back in with behind his jab. But he was trying that shit against Kell, and he had success doing that. He had success doing it against Errol Spence. He was beating Errol Spence up until he caught that eye injury. Say what you will, nobody wants to talk about that. He was beating Errol Spence before he caught that eye injury. Yeah, he was probably ahead by a couple rounds at that point. Maybe 3 rounds. Not before the like he had the eye injury and he kept fighting with it. And after he caught the eye injury, until the point where Errol Spence took him out of there, um, in my eyes, I thought Kell Brook had a few rounds in the bag, maybe 3. But a lot of knuckle draggers on the internet were saying that Kell Brook was going to be the where the common opponent that Errol Spence had, because I think that was the first common opponent that they had in which Bud Crawford was going to get exposed. Bud Crawford beat the shit out of Kell Brook. Come on, let's be we got to be candid. Nobody beat Kell Brook the way Bud Crawford beat Kell Brook. And if I remember correctly, now let's see. I'm just trying to go back in the Wayback Machine and look at Kell Brook's record to see when Gennady Golovkin got him out of there. Yeah, there was a 5th round TKO with Gennady Golovkin, where it was a 4th round TKO against Kell Brook. I mean, against Bud Crawford. And it didn't seem like it had much to do with the eye injury. It had more to do with the barrage and the ass whooping, the sheer ass whooping that Bud Crawford was dishing out. I mean, it may have also had with a lesser Kell Brook at that point when he fought Bud Crawford versus when he fought Errol Spence. Now that's fair, absolutely fair. But still, some people were saying that he was gonna wreck Bud Crawford, and that didn't happen. Another thing too, in terms of Kell Brook went on to fight Amir Khan after that fight. Now, Amir Khan, I mean, if you want to say he ain't shit, I mean, that's fair. But Kell Brook got him out of there in 7 rounds. And this was after he got beat by Bud Crawford. So, I mean, like, Bud Crawford dished out legit ass whooping in that fight. Now, again, we're still going on Terrance Buzz Crawford record or his performances at welterweight. Jeff Horn, never heard him. Jose Benavidez, never heard him. Amir Khan, never heard him. Mean Machine did hurt him. Arguably, some people say that he got knocked out in that fight. I mean, knocked down in that fight. Say, and you could do with that what you will, but Terrance Bud Crawford knocked out Mean Machine as well. Did Mean Machine hurt Bud Crawford? Sure. Kell Brook, did he hurt Bud Crawford? No. Now, this is the most important one. Sean Porter, did he hurt Bud Crawford? I didn't see it, honestly. I mean, if you guys want to tell me that he did, I mean, you want to leave it in the comments or in the chat, by all means. I didn't see an instance in which Sean Porter hurt Bud Crawford in the fight where they had against each other. Now, did Bud Crawford struggle with Sean Porter? Sure, he did. And Sean Porter had him against the ropes almost at will. Sean Porter was working him out against the ropes many times. Sean Porter was out muscling him a lot of times. He wasn't catching him with shots a lot of times when they were tied up in my eyes, but he was wearing him down. He was making him lose energy. But that's all for naught, because once they told Bud Crawford that he was behind in that fight, Bud Crawford following round, I think they told him in between after round 9, Bud Crawford puts him away. Did Bud Crawford get hurt versus Avanesian? No, he did not. Not once. I mean, and Bud Crawford was basically toying with Avanesian. Some people were calling that fight that don't like Bud Crawford. I'm not going to name the channel because I actually still like that channel. But when I actually didn't watch that fight live because I wasn't going to pay for it. And I hate apps in general, like especially the ones you got to pay for. But I was picking up a piece of furniture that day, I remember. and I think it was right before Christmas too. Yeah, December 10th. But I was picking up a piece of furniture that day, and a channel who I respect a lot was calling that fight. Now that channel had a lot of bad things to say about Bud Crawford signing with BLK Prime. Sometimes that channel still brings up the fact that Bud Crawford signed with BLK Prime. I don't know why. Like, I mean, it seems like BLK Prime is virtually a non-entity as of today. I mean, and it doesn't seem like Bud Crawford is much invested into BLK Prime. So I mean, like, why bring it up? But having said that, when I was coming back home with that piece of furniture and listening to that channel call that fight live, in my eyes, Bud Crawford, from what I was hearing from that channel, Bud Crawford was getting the shit beat out of him. Oh, this is the fight. Looks like Bud Crawford struggling with this fight. And then subsequently, Bud Crawford came back, knocks the shit out of Avanesian, knocked him out cold. I went on to watch that fight on YouTube later that day, and it was one of those shitty copies, like where they show like the fighters' heads and they're like this, and they gotta like keep panning in and out because they don't want to get a YouTube strike. One of those shitty copies of the fight that you see like right after on YouTube, and a lot of like times, if it's pay-per-view, that's like Canelo fights, I watch them mostly like that, YouTube. I don't pay for none of those fights. But if I get bored and I watch something before a football game or some shit, or like a Canelo fight after the fact, I'm watching it on YouTube. But watching it, I'm like, damn, bro. Like, there was no time when Bud Crawford was struggling with Avanesian in that fight. Not one bit. Having said that, though, did Avanesian hurt Bud Crawford? Absolutely not. So it's arguable as to whose chin is better. I mean, yeah, Errol Spence may get down and dirty to try to get some work started, but that's his style. Does he get hit in those in the process? At times, yeah. But does he get hurt in the process when he's doing that? Yes, absolutely. It's not to say that, and also, if you want to say that, no, it's like, also, it's not like Terrance Crawford, for a lot of you people that don't watch boxing much, is an avoidance type fighter. He's not a nimbly type Mayweather, where he's trying to wear you out by having you miss constantly. No, like Bud Crawford usually answers an exchange with an exchange of his own. Could that be dangerous in this fight? Listen, people say that that's dangerous for every Bud Crawford fight. Oh, well, he's not on this. He shows a little bit of a lack of discipline by trying to answer every shot. To me, that's a good thing. I mean, that's how you win rounds. You crazy? And I mean, he's won 39 fights up to this point, so he knows what he's doing in that sense. But the only thing that stops me from pounding my gavel and saying that Bud Crawford has a better chin at 147 than what Errol Spence has is that it's not debatable. I mean, like, Bud Crawford just hasn't fought that level of competition at 147. Period. I mean, and you want to go with Mean Machine hurting him. Did Mean Machine hurt Virgil Ortiz in that fight when they fought? No. I didn't see one time when Mean Machine hurt Virgil Ortiz. But I was coming into this video saying I was gonna proclaim that Errol Spence may have the edge on. Nah, I saw that Errol Spence had the edge as far as the chin department, but I can't say that. Now, as far as good things that Errol Spence brings into this fight, he is the bigger guy. It did scare me a little bit in that press conference what Errol Spence was looking like. I know what fighters that are drained look like. They look annoyed. Now, may he have been putting on a poker face? Possibly. The weigh-ins just happened not too long ago, and the official weigh-in, Errol Spence went in at 147, which is fantastic. I think Bud Crawford went in at 146.8. Whatever, fantastic too. As far as what both guys looked like yesterday at the press conferences, and And even before that, I don't like if I had to pick as to who looks more drained or like doesn't look like physically like up to par, I would say Errol Spence, but that's not like nothing to place your money on, like as to why you think Bud Crawford may win this fight, because Errol Spence, frankly, has looked like that a lot of fights. The one fight that I didn't see him looking uh, kind of like worn out or drained in recent history was against Danny Garcia. And again, look at how he went into that Danny Garcia fight. He was moving at will. He didn't get the knockout, but it was, in my eyes, the best performance of Errol Spence's career. You know what I'm saying? But so the weight drain factor, I can't put it on anybody. I mean, little bit concerning that Bud Crawford went in at 146.8, but in the past, fighters that I've seen that went in a little bit underweight didn't have that dry look to them going into their fight the following day. So that's kind of a wash in my eyes. They're both, I mean, and you could also say that Bud Crawford at 35, making the weight would affect him more, but he's the smaller guy. Now, as far as things that Bud Crawford has more than Errol Spence in this fight, or career-wise, like abilities, Bud Crawford, the switch hitting thing, it's a small factor in my eyes. Like, I mean, like some people look shitty when they change to different stances. Do I see that a lot with Bud Crawford? No, but it's not that he looks like resoundingly better. Like, to me, like when Bud Crawford does switch his stance, I mean, that's more to confuse the other guy rather than benefit him. It gives the other guy pause. He employed it really well against Avanesian, but I don't think Avanesian was much, or I never gave him much credit historically. Not going to give Bud Crawford much credit for knocking out an Avanesian in this fight. But Bud Crawford, footwork-wise, is a lot more nifty than what Errol Spence is. Errol Spence, to go by a recent history, a lot of times when he gets into work, he becomes a little bit square. Not only that, and that's in which he's standing flat, like sideways this way. Not only that, though, a lot of times when Errol Spence is looking to invest with his jab or try to work solely behind his jab or probe with his jab, sometimes he doesn't move his feet a lot in those exchange. At times, he'll actually spread his feet out extra wide, similar to what Fulton did against Inoue in this last fight. You know, Fulton is a superior jabber, and he was known going into this fight as one of the best jabbers probably in the sport. But a lot of times, like with fighters like that, not so much with Errol Spence, more so with Fulton, when they're trying to figure things out behind the jab, and somebody's coming at them, they'll get in a position where they want to land something with a little more oomph besides the jab, just based on impulse, and they stretch their feet out or they stretch their legs out too much. And I think Errol Spence does that a lot. Who's the now one pro for Errol Spence, like and I'll just say, who's the better fighter backing up? Some people won't agree with me, or who's the better fighter fighting off the back foot? I'm gonna say Errol Spence is a better fighter fighting off the back foot. But at times he just stops doing that. I.e., when he fought Ugas in this last fight, he was fighting off the back foot superbly in rounds 1 and 2. But then he cans it. And he cans it a lot of times or he stops employing that tactic of trying to fight moving back when he's having success doing that, because he's getting hurt or he's getting hit. And a lot of times he's getting hit because of the positioning of his legs. Errol Spence, as far as his leg positioning, is not very good. Not good at all, honestly. Like, he's more, I mean, he does have doesn't show up as a bad thing when he's wearing people down, but when he's getting things thrown in his direction, like Ugas was doing in those middle rounds, he doesn't look good. He doesn't look good. I mean, it's not beneficial to him one bit, because at that point, then you can't really work behind the jab because of your positioning. And the more dangerous aspect of that is not when he has his legs bowed, facing this way, in which his legs are like this, stretched out too much. So if he were, his legs are in this position, with his front leg, with his right leg all the way front and his left leg all the way back, yeah, it's not good for him to do that, and he does that a lot. But that's not the dangerous part of Errol Spence, or that's not the bad foot positioning or his worst foot positioning. His worst foot positioning is when people move to his right and he's pivots, but instead of pivoting with his legs behind him, he pivots with his legs, and he ends up in a position where his legs are side to side. And he did that a couple times against Ugas, and Ugas was catching him. And it's not as blatant like that. It's more like where you'll see his legs just standing like a bobo this way. No, you may not see that, but it's where his legs, where he's turning, and you know his right foot is gonna land at where he's more facing you flat. He does that a lot, and it's a tactical error. I think if he does that tomorrow, he's gonna have a lot of problems. Because one thing with Ugas in that fight against Errol Spence that I watched a couple hours ago is that a lot of times when Errol Spence was making that mistake, Errol Spence was catching him or was getting caught by one right hand. Now, do I think that Ugas is going to be catching Errol Spence with one right hand when he has a foot positioning error? Absolutely not. I could see Errol Spence catching him with the right and two more shots behind that, a la Monster anyway. Now, will one shot hurt Errol Spence from Bud Crawford like it did Fulton versus anyway? No, I don't think Errol Spence has that kind of power. But if he got hurt versus Ugas in that fashion, I will say with much conviction that Terrance Crawford does have more cracks than Ugas. Ugas does not have cracks like that. So I mean, if he does that kind of a mistake in there with Bud Crawford, it could be a short night for Errol Spence. Some people are going to bring up the fact that when Errol Spence lost his gum shield in that fight, that he made a tactical error and was looking for a timeout or a pause from the referee. I think he was anticipating, to be fair, I think he was anticipating that the referee would stop the action because the mouthpiece flew out. I'm not sure if the referee saw that happening in Errol Spence's defense, but you still can't do that. But it's not you can't do that against Terrance Crawford. Like Terrance Crawford is not going to let you off the hook in that sense. Sure, but it's like not it's a moot point in my eyes, because it's not like you saw Errol Spence do that a ton of times. You saw Errol Spence do that one time against Ugas. That was a weird fight. Like, that was a weird little instance. The excuse he came with afterwards that his teeth may have came out. Who knows? I mean, like, I can't put much credence behind that. I mean, like, there are people that don't want to be caught like smiling. Like, I know people like, that won't go out. Like, back in the day when they used to give you the one tooth like cap. Like, I knew a lot of my homies that had like the one cap that had the chip tooth with the little cap over it. And if they had to get pussy or some shit, like, they were pretty much canning it. Like, nah, I'm not going out there like with my tooth missing. So you never know. At the heat of the moment, maybe he thought like, all his teeth were gonna be out or some shit, and he was gonna be looking like a crackhead. Like, can he make that kind of error with Bud Crawford? No, but that was more of a one-off. I think people relish on that too much. Um, the one thing that I think Terrance Bud Crawford can't go in there doing is um, playing with his food too much, like letting Errol beat him out in a competition of jabs. Do I like the whole enigma of Errol Spence having this like the best jab in the sport type of deal? I mean, I think that that's a diminishing thing. Like in terms of like he had that jab like going a lot more back in the day than he does now. He didn't have that jab going against Porter where he kept Porter away at will. No, I didn't see that. He had that kind of a jab when he fought in Coney Island after the Olympics. He had that kind of a jab against Peterson. But that was so long ago, like that you can't say that Errol Spence has the best jab in the sport, or like, no, you definitely not. I would actually give the edge to Fulton in the jab department more than I would give it to Errol Spence. Does Errol Spence have a better jab than Crawford? Possibly. Does Errol Spence have more cracks than Crawford? I don't know. Possibly too. Does Errol Spence have more niftiness or slickness in the ring than Bud Crawford? Absolutely not. Does Errol Spence have more dog than Crawford? I can't say. I'd probably give that a little bit more of an edge to Bud Crawford. One thing that I do see though, like, and why I'm making my prediction is that Errol Spence, in my eyes, he may not have the better chin than Crawford. I think Bud Crawford has a little bit of a better chin than Errol Spence, but Errol Spence is not good with getting hit, or Errol Spence is not good under fire like Bud Crawford is. No way about, like, no two ways about it. Will they both be under fire tomorrow? I think so. But I think tomorrow, if Errol Spence does get in trouble or does get hit with anything concussive or does get hit with anything that will rattle him a little bit, that Bud Crawford is going to be able to capitalize tomorrow. I mean, he's fighting. This is the fight of his lifetime. This is the fight of both of their lifetimes. But more so with Bud Crawford in the sense that, Errol Spence may see himself possibly getting a Canelo fight in spite of losing this fight tomorrow. Errol Spence may think that the grass may continue to be green with the PBC and that he'll keep lining up little paydays for himself here and there. He was happy getting fighting a Danny Garcia for a couple $1,000,000, not to line people's pockets up, but he could probably see himself continuing to get paid like that and live off like the PBC paychecks in the future. I don't think Terrance Bud Crawford has that luxury. And so I don't think that Terrance in my mind, and Bud Crawford is 35 at this point in the latter portion of his career. Terrance Bud Crawford is going to go into that fight tomorrow, knowing that that's the fight of his lifetime. So I think that Spence is going into that with that same purview, possibly. I mean, it is the biggest fight of both their careers, but I'm gonna go with the dog factor as like Terrance Bud Crawford having more of the dog factor. I'm not gonna mention the whole switching stances thing, because to me it's a moot point. I mean, like what like if you want to say that it may benefit Bud Crawford if he has problems from the traditional stance and then he could revert to a southpaw stance, I mean, yeah, but I mean, to me, it's not much of a benefit with somebody of the level of Errol Spence. Like I said before, the switching stances has benefited Bud Crawford more in the sense with lesser competition that they get dazzled and they don't know what to do for 30 seconds. And he may use that to his advantage. I don't think that Errol Spence is gonna be dazzled by somebody switching his stance in the ring. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about all this shit. But I'm giving my prediction now. My prediction is two. My heart of hearts is saying that Bud Crawford is going to win this fight tomorrow by knockout or by TKO in the 12th round. 12th round, not TKO or knockout for Bud Crawford coming out victorious in this fight. I could also see another scenario in which Bud Crawford schools Errol Spence tomorrow. I think that's more of a far out prediction because Terrance Bud Crawford is fighting under the PBC banner tomorrow. PBC seemingly doesn't want to do any favors for Bud Crawford. So I mean, like I would edge more of a decision if it were close going to Errol Spence Jr. But this could be a fight in which Errol Spence maybe struggles mightily early on or in the middle portion, and Terrance Bud Crawford wins rounds handedly, and Errol Spence don't know how to react to that. I've seen Terrance Bud Crawford coming back from a fight in which he was down. I've seen Terrance Bud Crawford coming back from fights in which he was hurt. I've only seen one fight or where Errol Spence came back from getting hurt, really, which was kind of where I saw him get hurt the most was kind of versus Ugas. And that concerns me. That concerns me because Ugas is not a hard hitter like that. And I'm saying that more. That was just the one instance in which Ugas knocked out his gum shield, where he was hurt more than any time that Sean Porter hurt him. But I did see Sean Porter hurt him a ton of times in that fight. Even though Sean Porter was racking up rounds versus Terrance Bud Crawford. Did he hurt Bud Crawford? In my eyes, no. There was not one instance in that fight. Again, prove me wrong or come in the comments after the fact. I'm going to watch that fight again after the Met game this evening. But I didn't see an instance in which Sean Porter hurt Bud Crawford. And Sean Porter, again, another person is not known to be this concussive puncher and this hard puncher. He's more of a body of work and weigh you down kind of guy. In spite of that, he did hurt Terrance Crawford. I mean, he did hurt Errol Spence. More than once. So I see this more going in terms of a knockout than it would a decision. So my three predictions, number one, my three scenarios in which I could see this out. Number one, I see Errol Spence getting knocked out late in the fight, whether by TKO or a cold knockout. Either way, 12th round. That's what I'm calling right now. My other thing is where Terrance Bud Crawford eases into a decision by frustrating Errol Spence, and then we have a rematch shortly thereafter. Could see that happening too. But I could also envision a decision going Errol Spence's direction if it were a close fight. So that's my predictions. For now, my number one prediction is Errol Spence beating this fight. I mean, Errol Spence losing by 12th round knockout. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm hoping that this is going to be one of my last boxing videos, unless I get on somebody's panel. But I'm not like even impassioned by that stuff more. Hopefully, in the future of this channel, I want to keep talking about more things happening in the world and whatnot. Because shit, this is the craziest. I always tell people that you're living in the craziest time ever. You know, with what happened in 2020, with what's happened in 2021. With what's happening now, we're at the brink of a world war. Some people may tell you shit's just all the way funky. I know you feel it like I feel it. So why not talk about that? You know what I'm saying? So, and also boxing is whack. Boxing, I mean, like, we're like, in boxing's defense, and with the fact that this fight is coming to fruition finally, boxing has had a bit of a better year in 2023, but it's not the kind of year to reel me back in. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm gonna take my channel elsewhere. But this is a big event. I mean, the Hagler Horns comparison in relation to Errol Spence, Bud Crawford, I think is a cheap comparison, but it does hit the mark. I mean, like, you have two brothers, black fighters, fighting each other. I hope that this sets the trend and have more brothers fighting each other early on, especially. I mean, I like Devin Haney mixing it up with Shakur, mixing it up with Rougarou. That's gonna happen soon, probably. Mixing it up with Tank Davis, fucking Mr. Avoidance himself. I want to see more of that happening. You don't need Latin fighters to mix it up with black fighters to sell cards. Anybody who tells you that is an idiot. I mean, like, let's get back. Let's bring, like, not even get back to bringing boxing to brothers fighting brothers as premier events, as pay-per-view events, if you want. I know I'm not gonna pay for it. But we gotta get out of that mold. I mean, that's the only if the brothers want to get back on top of boxing, then clear each other out. Don't wait on like Canelo to throw you a bone. Like, that's stupid shit. It's not that. I mean, if that's the tactic you want to employ, by all means, whatever. But that's what's getting me a lifelong boxing fan. I've been watching boxing since I was a kid. My first pay-per-view, Frank versus Mike Tyson. Come on, bro. Like, I boxed for years, and this is not. Now, I'm not telling you I boxed where I can't find evidence of me boxing. I boxed at the Dungeon in Sunset Park, the illest boxing gym in Brooklyn. I love the sport. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if you're gonna have me waiting around, like, and squeeze, and then the thing is too that a lot of like the tough talk or the world breaking fucking instances that happen that may lead to a fight, i.e. like trash talk between boxing, happens on like fucking Twitter or Instagram or some shit, and it's not even like tough like that. Like, I expect like tough talk to being like, I hope one of your kids dies, like, from me seeing you, from them seeing me whoop your ass if you ever get into the ring with me. Like, the tough talk in boxing will be like a set of emojis and like or a laughing emoji or some shit, and not even that stuff happens frequently. That shit happens like 6 months, and then motherfuckers want to come onto YouTube and making it seem like, oh my god, it's such a big deal. Like, if somebody insulted me like on Instagram or Twitter, I wouldn't even know. Not everybody's on Instagram or Twitter, nor would I give a shit. That's internet shit. You know what I'm saying? And that's what boxing is succumbed to. A lot of stupid shit happening on the internet rather than in the ring. If the internet gangster bullshit or trash talk led to more fights, then I'd be all for it. But it's not. You have celebrities creeping their way into the primetime, i.e. Ryan Garcia, and to a bigger degree, Ryan Paul, and like, come on, man. Like, I knew that stuff could have potentially happened. I always knew that, maybe somebody was going to offer one celebrity and another celebrity a lot of money to fight each other in the 90s. But internet celebrities mean dick to me. Like, I could give two shits. Like, honest, it's not like George Clooney's fighting or some shit, and I wouldn't give a shit about George Clooney fighting. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know what like fucking Paul Ryan or whoever the hell I just mentioned do. Like, I barely give a shit about Ryan Garcia fighting because he's a bummy fighter. I mean, like, he gets by more with his looks. Like, and dudes want to make it seem like it was an A1 event that he fought against Tank Davis. Tank Davis, I'm sorry, bro. I think Tank Davis is potentially pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. But Tank Davis's career is ass cheeks. and dudes want to get on YouTube and get butt hurt if God forbid I mention that shit. If I mention that shit, then I'm being racist. Some corny criticism, and that's why I want to take my shit elsewhere and not cover boxing at all. I mean, if you're a boxing fan who likes somewhat political takes or worldview takes, or and you want to keep listening to my shit or listening to me babble in the future, I mean, come along. I need every subscriber I could get. I'm fiending for subscribers. I got 189. But am I gonna keep talking boxing in an effort to get subscribers? Absolutely not. I'm not gonna do shit for subscribers. I mean, if you don't like what I'm saying, I'm not gonna switch it up much more. Especially when I start doing my political talk. But do I want to keep going round and round in YouTube boxing internet world? Not one bit. And shout out to a lot of the good channels. I still listen to a lot of channels on YouTube. Blood Boxing, Goodfellas Sports TV. My man Southpaw 77. If you got an issue with Southpaw, I mean that's up to you. But Southpaw has a lot. When you have him on, you gotta listen. I mean that to me that makes a good channel. Who else? My brothers. I mean please Michael Johnson, Boxing Talk and More, The Watcher, Lowe's Dawkins. I'm giving these dudes credit too because they're the bros too. But who else do I still listen to? I mean, Coach Malachi Williams, fantastic channel. Coach Malachi Williams single-handedly destroyed the Errol fan base. In large part, destroyed the LDBC. I mean, because he puts out great content. I mean, and the dude's hard hitting, giving point at the point. My man got dope ass edits. Mark Nash, another dope channel. I still listen to Mark Nash, Reggie Owens, Boxing Talk and More. I listen to, even though at times he could be a little bit one-sided when it comes to an issue, whether it be boxing or whatnot. But he still has he puts it out in with thought. You know what I'm saying? Or he explains himself. And he's funny too, but I can't with all these other dudes that trust me, one of the reasons I got off of listening to YouTube boxing is because fights don't happen, and when fights don't happen, then fans start fighting each other, and that shit gets ugly. I mean, the last 7 years of infighting with boxing fans is mostly black on black. Boxing fans hating on each other because Errol Spence and Bud Crawford chose not to fight each other for a decade, and that shit just got ass cheeks to me. I mean, if it's not entertaining. I mean, I don't want to hear all these imaginary takes and dudes hating on each other. There's so many dudes that I know that stopped talking to each other, that were best friends via YouTube. How whack is that? You know what I'm saying? That stopped talking to each other because of boxing fandom beef. That shit is corny to me. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I and it's not that I want to knock boxing. That's my reason for leaving Boxing Talk behind. And no, I don't think that if Bud Crawford loses tomorrow, I'm not leaving the Boxing Talk alone, because I feel in the back of my heart that Bud Crawford may lose this fight, and oh my lord, my fandom is going to be exposed. No, Bud Crawford wins this fight tomorrow, fantastic. Errol Spence wins this fight tomorrow, fantastic. I mean, it's good for a brother to be on top. So you're gonna get that either way. That's great. It's good for both of them to make a lot of money tomorrow. That's great for them too. But I could give two shits. They're not the fight. Bud Crawford isn't the fighter I love the most. In the last but for the last 2 years or something. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not a fanboy like that. When Trinidad was doing his thing, I wasn't a big fan of Trinidad's. Especially after Hopkins beat the shit out of him. And I didn't like Hopkins until he beat the shit out of Trinidad. You know what I'm saying? It's not on like that. I wasn't a big fan of Camacho. Not at all. I didn't like Camacho much when he was fighting And yes, I was around when Camacho was still fighting. I mean, to my defense though, too, like when I got into watching more boxing on TV as a kid, that was at the point where Camacho was getting wrecked a lot of times, and he didn't want to fight Sweet Pea in my eyes, and he talked a lot of shit about Sweet Pea, but he wasn't trying to line it up with Sweet Pea. But in addition to that, I mean, he already got wrecked by Camacho. I mean, by Chavez, and I hated Chavez when I was a kid. I liked Chavez more after when he was a commentator in Spanish. But I say that to say that I've never been a fanboy like that of any fighter. You know what I'm saying? Like the only Puerto Rican fighter that I was behind like that was Cotto, and that was more when I was buying pay-per-views, and Danny Garcia in a sense because his dad reminds me of my dad, and Danny Garcia looks like my son. And I like hood Puerto Rican dudes from the East Coast. Like I am a hood Puerto Rican dude from the East Coast. So like, could you blame me? You know what I'm saying? But having said all that, am I like, did I ever come on here like, oh no, don't you dare talk about Danny Garcia or Danny Garcia's the illest thing since sliced bread? No, never that, bro. You go look at my shit. I don't erase videos. Having said that, though, I do want to talk about. I do want to pivot away from boxing because boxing talk, there's not much there for me personally. I mean, I'm still gonna listen to boxing talk here and there when I'm bored, especially. But I'm not on it like that no more. I want to move on to greener pastures. I want to talk about all kinds of other things, but not boxing as much. I'll leave that to the big dogs. I say that too, like, so I'm trying to think of channels that I didn't mention because I don't want to diss nobody either. I mean, if they did, then I'm gonna be butthurt. They're not watching my shit like that anyway. But that's it. I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed one of my last forays into boxing talk. But with that, I wish both guys tomorrow, Errol Spence and Bud Crawford, health, and they both come out of there healthy. I wish them both wealth and happiness in the future. But I'm out of the sport. But with that, I hope you guys have a good evening and have a good weekend. Much love. Peace.